Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and greetings to everyone. Welcome to Mark for our program Conversations with Authors. My name is Shabir Jaffer and I'm one of the directors here. Every month we invite an author or an academic from the Muslim community to join us, talk about their work and answer some questions. Let me begin the session by telling you a little bit about Mark. The Mullah Askar Memorial Library and Islamic Resource Center, or MARC for short, is named after the late Mullah Askar Ali M.M. Jaffer, who was a scholar and a beacon of the Khoja Heritage community. At MARC, we have three strands of work. Knowledge navigation is the first one. MARC works to make Islamic knowledge accessible by maintaining an Islamic library that is available 7 days a week, having seminar space available for Islamic classes and discussion groups, hosting various children's programs, producing exhibitions that promote Islamic learning, and providing links to resources for further Islamic studies on its website. The second strand of work is heritage. MARC works to preserve and promote learning about the heritage of the Khoja Heritage community through the collection and preservation of heritage texts, hosting a permanent wing dedicated to Khoja history, as well as short-term exhibitions highlighting aspects of Khoja heritage, and producing and publishing literary and multimedia materials about Khoja history. The third strand is interfaith. MARC works to improve relations between people of different faiths by hosting interfaith events, opening its doors to visiting school groups and others who would like to learn more about Islam and the Shia faith, and creating exhibitions and multimedia that encourage learning about different religions and promote interfaith dialogue. Now, if you'd like to know more about what we do at MARC, please visit our website at markresource.org. That's markresource.org. You can also sign up to receive news of our future events and access videos of past ones. In a moment, I will introduce you to our author for today's program. I have a number of questions for her, and after that, I'll turn it over to you, the audience, our listeners, to ask for your comments or questions on her work. Kindly use the chat function in Zoom to text your questions to us. If you want to ask a question orally, please click on the little hand icon in Zoom to let us know, and we'll let you in. So now, let's meet today's author. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome Zainab Karim of Toronto, Canada. Zainab Karim was born in Mombasa, Kenya, and migrated to Toronto, Canada in 2011. She studied creative and professional writing with a focus on journalism at York University. While dabbling in poetry, free-form writing, and storytelling, she wrote her first complete story and self-published her first book, called Asiyah, A Quest for Self-Love, in 2016. And there it is. This book will be the focus of our conversation today. Zainab is currently finishing a master's degree in teaching and education at the University of Toronto and working on a children's book entitled Amena Can Do Difficult Things, with the exclamation mark at the end. Zainab is extremely passionate about the content and art that goes into her writing, and hopes to write more books that inspire her readers to question, reflect, and grow. So Zainab, welcome to MARC and welcome to Conversations with Authors.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much.
Very welcome, and thanks for joining us today. So you've had a busy few months, I know, trying to finish up your master's degree. Are you almost done, or are you still in the throes of exams and things?
So we actually just ended our last semester, and we have our final semester in January.
Okay.
We will have 2 more months of like academics, but then we have another 2 months for teaching experience. So we'll actually go into schools and be responsible for a classroom.
Right. And you're going to be working on Amena Can Do Difficult Things at the same time, are you?
Yeah, in fact, I'm hoping that my experience there is going to inform my writing, because most of what I like to do is to observe children, observe the things that they struggle with, and then use that to inform the stories that I write about and the children that I write about.
Good stuff. Good stuff. We need more young writers for young adults, should I say. All right, let's start with the first question. Tell us about your journey towards becoming an author and writing your first book, Asiyah. What were some of the highlights of this journey? Just briefly, please. Thank you.
Right. So already, I think a lot of people know about the process of how the whole thing came to be. Basically, it started off with the crowdfunding campaign that most people probably remember, where I had a goal. I'm sorry?
Nope. Okay. I'm nodding in agreement. Go ahead.
A goal of, I think it was $6,000. And the aim of that was to help me be able to afford some of the nitty-gritty tasks that go into self-publishing a book, such as the editing, like to hire an editor, the printing, the marketing, all of that fun stuff. And so once the crowdfunding campaign was over, that was when the final processes of writing and finalizing the manuscript came about. That's also when I found my editor. We went back and forth for a few months trying to finalize the manuscript. And then I had already found a printer in BC. So I sent off the PDF to her. She printed it off, sent me, boxes and boxes of the book. And then the marketing began. So honestly, with regards to the highlights, I would say definitely holding the book for the first time in my hands was a big highlight. It was a journey of about 2 years, I would say, trying to make it happen. So that was a very exciting moment. Another really interesting thing was just how the family came together. So it wasn't just my immediate family, but also my external family, my relatives. My parents were, hardcore selling and advertising copies of the book in Mombasa. My brothers were talking to people trying to, get in the big pledges. My cousins in Dar es Salaam and in Australia and just all over the world were helping with like spreading the word and things like that. So it was a really cool collaborative project for our family to get the word out. I would say also a big highlight was the response that I got from the audience and the reviews that some of the people gave me, whether it was a story that impacted their mindset in some way or helped them think through a difficult situation. People in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s were writing to me and telling me about the little things that they took away from the book. So I would have to say that was a big highlight as well.
Right. And what about the book cover? It's a very eye-catching cover. Did you have anything to do with its design, or did you have somebody do that for you?
No, absolutely. In fact, I went on 99 Designs. It was a website that my husband recommended to me. And I realized that the designs that I was interested in by the designers were all way out of my budget. I think there was like $100 budget, there was $200 budget. And I found this designer in, I think it was a $600 or $700 budget that I just fell in love with his work. And I wrote to him and I said, listen, I can only probably, pay, for the silver standard or whatever the name of that budget was. I can probably only pay you, this much, but I really love your work. And I think that, you've not done anything like a cover for this kind of a story, hijabi, because I think he was Italian, if I'm not mistaken. And all his designs were, rom-coms and sci-fi and all of that stuff. And I said, this is an interesting thing for you to try, so even if I may not be able to afford you, maybe you'll just be interested in it as something different. And amazingly, he agreed. And so even though I didn't pay, what he deserved, it was just something that he did out of the goodness of his heart.
You're very persuasive. Okay. The book's opening pages contain a number of interesting quotes from various authors, as well as from our holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Kitab al-Kafi. Now, one of the authors you quote is John Berger, whose book Ways of Seeing was published in 1972 by the BBC. It's obviously one of the set books that your protagonist Asiyah Jaffa, what a wonderful name, has to read at university, and is coincidentally one of my favorite books. I actually read it when I was at university, so but that dates me. Did you study Berger's work, not just his book, but the rest of his work at university?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, what a coincidence that you like this book and you actually own it, which is really cool. I should probably go and get a copy myself as well. And yeah, so it was definitely one of the books that, you know, are just on the reading list of courses, yes, as the required readings that no one ever does. For some reason, I think I probably just went to look for the summary online. And as I was reading the summary, I actually, you know, thought to myself that I really should read this book because it explored a lot of different concepts that I was interested in. Yeah. And so I got it and I read it. And, you know, even though it's a book that primarily revolves around art and paintings, it is really a book about seeing and perspective and how we conduct ourselves in societies and the differences in the representations between men and women. Yes. And a concept that really stood out to me was Berger's views on happiness, the happiness of being envied, which was such a mind-blowing concept to me because it really encapsulates such a big idea in such a simple phrase. And it can describe societies and people within themselves, which is also a really interesting thing because, you know, we also have the idea of the surveyor and the surveyed. We employ those concepts not just externally in a society, but also internally. And yeah, that's pretty much what builds things like the standards of beauty and the standards of success or material success that we all then aim for. So the surveyor and the surveyed is the concept that is discussed in the quote that I selected.
Okay, good one. I think all of the quotes that you chose reflect some of the recurring themes in your book. For example, Asiyah's struggle, the struggle with using makeup and wearing fashionable clothes to make herself more physically appealing to her potential suitors, which she's constantly nagged about by her older sister, Zara. Because if it was up to Asiyah, she'd probably wear cargo pants or track pants, based on the book. Which of them do you think best demonstrates not only her dilemma as a young woman, but those of today's like-minded Muslim young women?
Yeah, for sure. These quotes were all like very carefully selected because sometimes authors just say things in ways that, you know, I myself can't really articulate, and they say things so beautifully and simply that I felt like I needed their input to set the pace for the story. The quote that I would select would definitely have to be the one by Ruba Ali. Mm-hmm. And the reason I really like her quote is that it's along the same lines of capturing a lot of big concepts in one small paragraph. Yes. One of the concepts that I really liked was turning hijab into somewhat of a fetish, which you will find a lot of that, unfortunately, on social media, because you do see hijab being practiced in a way that really is not hijabi and actually goes against, you know, a lot of the whole purpose of hijab. Mm-hmm. She also talks a lot about the irony of seeking that validation from your audience. And while, you know, generally the narrative these days is one of self-love and acceptance and recognizing your blessings and being grateful, but then we have this, you know, hijabi social media, let's call them members, who are advocating for makeup brands, for brands that, you know, just sell junk, to be honest. And when you examine that closely, it reveals a lot of problems in you know, rooted in consumerism and this inherent dissatisfaction with what you are and what you have and what you look like. Right. So maybe this doesn't describe a lot of people and the way they practice on social media, but, you know, or maybe it, you know, a lot of people would like to think that it doesn't describe the way that they practice on social media, but I think at the root of it, that's more or less what it is. Yeah. And so that's why this quote is so perfect in describing this dilemma we experience as young adults living in a country that's not fully ours. One of the quotes that actually overlaps with that is the one by Matt Haig about happiness not being very good for the economy. So they kind of go hand in hand, but definitely Ruba Ali's quote was pretty
Those
incredible.
Are some very interesting perspectives. Thank you for sharing. So later on, you wrote an amusing description of the entrance of Bobby Auntie in Asiyah's life. Bobby Auntie is the proverbial matchmaker, I guess, of the community. And I quote from your book, you see, Bobby Auntie is one of the community's few unbashful, loud, and proud matchmakers. She knows all the young adults in the community by undergrad degree and or job status. Does everywhere our community resides in the world have someone like Bobby Auntie? And what do you think people who are not from South Asian cultures would make of her?
I think for sure everyone from our kind of community, they have matchmakers. And I think even people from, other communities, Middle Eastern communities, I'm sure, matchmaking is a lot more common than we think.
No, I'm thinking about a matchmaker like her, one of these loud and proud ones.
I think okay, that's a good distinction. I think nowadays maybe people are a bit more undercover and not as like loud and proud. But with regards to, how people outside the cultures would view this kind of lady, I think, while it may seem odd to, be so kind of enthusiastic and unbashful, if that's a word, about, keeping tabs on everybody and doing this kind of thing, I do think we need, we need matchmakers. They play a really big role in the community. And, while it may not seem obvious at the surface level, I think they actually keep the community together. And what they do, it's a sign of concern, it's a sign of care for our youth who, depending on their situation, they may not have, the right like judgment or the right decision making progress when, thinking about some of these big things. And so matchmakers and whoever is interested, in pairing people up, I think it really is an expression of love and care and concern, not just for the youth and the society, but also for the preservation of our culture. So while it may seem odd to people outside of the culture, I think it's definitely something to be, proud about and something to preserve and protect.
So do you aspire to be one day, Zainab?
I have one under my belt.
Oh, good for you.
It's a long story, but I do have one under my belt. I don't know if I would necessarily want to label myself as something like that, but I think if it's a happy coincidence, I would definitely pursue, trying to do that for someone.
Good for you. Good for you. Okay, so when Asiyah's sister Zara learns the name of the boy whose parents asked the matchmaker about Asiyah, she quickly goes onto Facebook to see what he looks like. I suppose that in today's age of social media, there's no escaping scrutiny or staying undercover until the day that the young man and woman actually get to meet in person, is there?
I would definitely agree to that. And in fact, I think it expands even further from just like a boy and a girl who want to get married. I think whether it's in the workplace or even at school, online, I have this Facebook chat where all of my cohort members, talk and ask questions and support each other. And on this chat, before we start any course, there's always one or two people who right away look up the professor that we're going to have for that course and then check their Instagram, check their Facebook, check their Twitter or LinkedIn. And they get everything, like the 411 on like what their past experiences are, how they conduct themselves online. So, your online persona, it's not just become a page with a bunch of photos. It's a reflection of who you are and your worldviews and things you care about. And it's a representation of your stance on life and your humanity. And so when I looked at it that way, it made a lot of sense that we want to, find out about people and we want to find out what their aura is and what they care about. So I think it's almost like a moral burden in some ways, because you have to uphold, a certain level of, things that are acceptable to the society online. And it just determines your likability as a person, I think.
Makes it all the more important for politicians to not post their indiscreet comments or inappropriate photos online if they want to get the votes afterwards, which many of them have fallen victim to by doing that. Anyway, so that's the social media part of it, and I guess there is no escaping or staying undercover. Okay, so when Asiyah meets up with her friends Iman and Masuma, the talk turns to one of Masuma's more intimate engagement photos. Talking of inappropriate photos, you opined that there was a time when a girl and a boy would not be caught dead together in public, even after their engagement. And then Asiyah remarks that the era of communal parenting is long gone, perhaps because the era of independence, freedom, and romance kicked it out. Please tell us more about that.
Right. So I've thought a lot about, communal parenting, and I've come to the conclusion that it truly is a gift and something that, we should treasure and maintain, especially now in this country where parents alone are not enough in looking out for their children. And especially, when the children are outside of the home.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite of communal parenting, what that means is just distance and boundaries between people. And I don't think that's a successful way to build bonds with each other.
Right.
There's a funny story that in fact, it just came, I've just been thinking about it recently. When it comes to communal parenting, this is when I was very, very young. I was at a friend's house, and we were all having dinner around the table, and her mom was there too, my friend's mom. And I was the only one left at the table who hadn't finished my meal because I had one giant potato on my plate. And I kept telling my aunt, please, like, I don't want to eat this potato. I'm so full. I'm done. Like, can I leave? And she was like, no. Like, you're not getting up until you eat this potato. And so, I know that at the surface level, there's a lot of like dysfunction there. And there's a lot of like, if that would happen today, probably I would have grown up with like trauma, and I would never be able to look at a potato or eat a potato ever again. That seems to be how the way children work these days. So, I know that that's probably not the best way, but if you boil it down and see what's happening underneath the surface, I think there's a lot of care from the side of the aunt, and there's a lot of respect from my side that, I'm going to listen to you, even though I ended up like, holding the potato in my mouth and then flushing it down the toilet later. I think the idea is that, I don't want to oppose you, and I respect your opinion, and I want, to listen to you, and I want you to be happy with me. So I think the emotions at, below the surface are very valuable, and it's worth holding on to those. But for sure, we can practice things in a different way, and, with some modifications, actually turn communal parenting into something that not just, it's not about power or dominating other people's children, but it's actually about nurturing and caring for them and expressing that support and, sense of community.
Takes me back to that famous saying, it takes a village to raise a child.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So moving on to chapter 2, your description of how our community women prepare for the birth anniversary of Lady Fatima, daughter of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That description conveyed some real irony, and I'll quote: "They gather in our centers wearing expensive outfits, jewelry, matching shoes and purses to display their appreciation and joy for a woman who is the quintessence of simplicity, contentment, and humility." What a wonderful observation. How common do you think this feeling is? And really, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, Zainab. Shouldn't we give our ladies a break for doing that, given that they spend over 2 months of our religious calendar in a state of mourning, wearing black clothes and no makeup?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you asked this question, and how timely it is, since the birth anniversary of Bibi Zainab was yesterday. Yes. So Khushali Mubarak to you, in belated Khushali Mubarak, and to all of you who are listening. Yeah. So I'm really glad you've asked this question, because I think it's important for me to clear something up, which is that not only am I not against using makeup, I actually encourage it, and I use makeup myself from time to time. And I think there's a lot of skill and talent and creativity and, precision. Like it needs precision and patience that comes out of it. And it's a skill like any other artistic talent. But I think the problem is when we transition from using makeup as, a fun and harmless thing, as a way to alter our appearance, or to look like other people, or to subscribe to some kind of standard where people have decided what looks good and what doesn't, and we use makeup as a way to fulfill that. I think that's when we start to enter dangerous territories, because then what happens is it impacts self-confidence, it impacts self-esteem, and it creates these insecurities and this pressure to conform to something. And I think all these things, undoubtedly, they will have an impact on people's spirituality and their relationship with God ultimately, because what happens then is people begin to turn to these finite and intangible things as a source of confidence and as a source of peace. Whereas, those are not appropriate and they will never be sufficient as a source of confidence and peace. And so, while I'm more than happy to, give women a break for, just enjoying makeup innocently and harmlessly and for fun, I have zero desire to give a break to women who participate in perpetuating these ideologies that really affect people's self-confidence, affects their spirituality, and just gives birth to incorrect understandings of inner peace and confidence and life generally, and goals, and what worthy goals are. Yeah,
it's fascinating observation there. All right, moving on in the interest of time, because I do want to get some questions from our listeners. As Asiyah argues with her mum over what to wear at the Khushali program, given that the mother of her suitor is going to be there, she makes the observation that I quote here, "The generation my mother was born into is different from the one I have been born into. And the ideology of one's clothing reflecting one's social status was a societal law decades ago, not a preference based on liberality and comfort." Now, I would put to you that this ideology is also shared by today's younger generation. Would you agree with that, or do you really think it's entrenched in the older generation?
I definitely do agree. And I think it's the kind of crazy thing about the world and the way the world works, which is the current generation always has things that, they criticize and learn from and observe from the previous generation. And even if they do something differently, the next generation is still going to make, their own observations and have their own ways of dealing with the same things. So I think it's just a cycle of learning and growing and adapting, and just different ways of dealing with the same things.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to chapter 6, as Asiyah is getting ready to meet her first suitor at home, that's Salim, she asks rhetorically, and I really like this passage, by the way, I have to say it, how do you handle a situation you've never been faced with before? How do you prepare your mind for a conversation you've never had before? She's referring to the conversation she's about to have with this boy who she's never met and who's coming to, check her out, as it were. How do you face someone for the first time and hold your heart out to them just to see if they fancy you enough to accept? Now, that's a very insightful look into the minds and feelings of young women in this situation, I would say. Do you think that young men ask themselves similar questions as they are on their way to the young lady's house?
That's a very difficult question for me to answer, because there's no way for me to know what young men would ask themselves. But I would imagine it's not the same, because I don't think the process is as high stakes for men as it is for women, because I think for women it's a lot about the impact on their self-confidence and the idea, Berger's idea of the surveyor and the surveyed, and it's about that validation and that desirability. So I think it's definitely a lot more high stakes for women than for men.
Okay, that from the acceptability point of view, because I would tell you that young men are just concerned about whether the young lady will accept their entreaties too.
But do you think that maybe that's something that's maybe a little bit newer? I think you're in a better position to say this. So I think I'll turn that back to you and ask you that. Do you think that maybe these days, men are a bit more conscious and a bit more like sensitive to that kind of thing than before? Yeah.
Well, Zainab, you're putting me on the spot here. You asked me to go back 35 years to when I first approached my wife, now of 35 years. I would say I probably wasn't asking the same questions, but I was certainly curious to know what she was about and how to prepare for her, as Asiyah was asking. So Yeah, all right. Interesting to see the two different perspectives, his and hers. But I'm curious. In her journalism class, Asiyah makes a bold statement in her thesis, and I quote, "There will never be fully social, gender, or racial equality because of preset hierarchies of power, unrealistic standards of beauty among men and women, and the persistent objectification of women in society." How much do you personally subscribe to this opinion?
I subscribe to it a lot, but maybe not for the reasons that people might think. I think men and women will never be equal, and I think it's an irrational goal to, have men and women be equal. Each gender has their own power and their own purpose that they bring to the table, and so equality should never be the goal. The goal rather should be how each gender can fulfill their potential and build their lives using their strengths and their God-given abilities to serve themselves as well as the community. I think the community needs to be a big part of that equation. The hierarchies of power and the standards of beauty, those are all things that complicate the very simple reality, which is that men and women are indeed different and do not need to be equal.
Okay. Yeah, and I would change that slightly. I would say men and women are different but equal.
Okay, yeah.
It's possible to be both.
Right. That makes sense too, actually.
Right? I mean, it's fairly, I guess it's a, what's the word? But it's fairly obvious. But I think if you really think about it, that's the ideal, and in many cases the reality that we would want to achieve there. Okay. So that was the journalism class that she was in the university. Later on, when it's announced that Asiyah's suitor Salim wants to meet her again, her sister Zara immediately steers the conversation to what she's going to wear, telling her, I quote, "You're getting married now. Do you know how life-changing that is? You have to become a different person. You have to grow up. It's not just about what's convenient for you anymore, okay?" Zainab, is that a message that young women in our community often hear from their older relatives?
So I think, Asiyah and Zahra, I think Zahra, her heart was in the right place when she was advising Asiyah, that you need to grow up. And I think the problem with Asiyah is that she, there is certainly a sense of denial about, the way life works. And, I think, it's not as much about, how many people are saying it or how often people hear it, as much as it is about the message, which is that, as you grow up, you have to do things that are inconvenient. And that's part of adulthood. And I think that definitely adults can misguide their children with regards to what those inconvenient things are, which is what was happening in the case with Asiyah and her mom. But there's also a lot of good things that can come from the message of not always doing what's convenient, because it's in that difficulty and in that challenge where, the growth and the development happens. So yes, life is hard, but that's not a statement that makes somebody weak or incapable of, facing those realities or the difficulty of life. Rather, it's a statement that you acknowledge and accept that reality. Right. And then the next step is hopefully, okay, what can I do about that? And it kind of leads you in a productive place in this difficult, inconvenient world. So I think my idea when I wrote that was very much about that message about it. It doesn't come out in the perfect way because Zahra is not really set up as the perfect giver of advice, which I think a lot of us aren't in our own ways. But, it boils down to just a message that, life's hard and, you can't just respond to it by saying, oh, no, this is the way I am. I want to wear sweatpants.
Yeah. Okay. Before I go to my last couple of questions, I just wanted to note that there were a number of lines in the book that stood out for me. But I guess the one that I'd love you to maybe just address is the one that happened or that took place just before her suitor came over, and she went to Suzy Share, a retail store, to look for look for clothes. And she holds up this item of clothing, and she says, "I can't really wear you anyway. There's no way to hijabify this." So you just introduced a new verb to the English language, Zainab. You hijabify a piece of clothing. How did you come up with that?
Honestly, I think that's a very common sentiment. I don't know if it's ever been, said in that exact way, hijabify, but I think it is a common sentiment that young Muslim women face, that how do I take this really nice piece of clothing that, is not hijabi, how do I make that hijabi? Right. So while the word itself, I don't know if it's been said before, but the sentiment is definitely very common.
No, the Oxford English Dictionary just contacted me and said if they could add it to the to their contents.
I think they should.
All right. If you could rewrite this story, what would you change?
Honestly, there's a lot that I would change, because there are a lot of themes and observations that perhaps don't apply anymore, or in the society they've just kind of transitioned and transformed into different ways that people practice those things. But I would definitely change this concept that self-love is the end goal, because Asiyah's whole journey is to go from a place of dealing with that pressure from her mom, from her society for looking a certain way, from her sister as well, and presenting herself a certain way, to reaching a place of self-confidence and self-acceptance. But what I would change is that self-love really, it's just the first step. Life it's a journey of growth and pain and self-discovery and a partnership with other people, being a decent person. And so there's so much more just after that, like self-love, I'm okay with myself. You need that, but that's not it. So I think if there was one thing I would change about the book, it's that making sure that the message is not about you reach this one thing and then it's over, you're good, but rather you reach this one thing and then that equips you to deal with the other difficulties in life.
Okay. Very good observation. Okay, last question. Do you have any plans to write another fiction book for 20-somethings? Not a kid's book, but the 20-somethings of the world, like you did with this one.
Right. So this is something I have been thinking about a lot, because I think I'm in a very interesting just mental space where I'm not really doing this to build a career. I don't really feel the need to establish myself as an author. And I think that, liberates me from having to do the same thing over and over again, to build my portfolio, regardless of whether the passion is there or not. And so I think as a result of that, I can kind of go in any direction that my heart and my mind is kind of taking me in. And I think right now where that is actually, books for a younger audience. I think there are some things that I talked about in Asiyah, some of the themes that, kids should be learning at a younger age. We shouldn't wait until adulthood to learn about some of these things. And so the allure about children's books is that you really have to simplify your message. And, I don't need 300 pages of a made-up story to get across some of these important points. There's a quote by, I don't remember his second name very well, but I think his name is Marcus Cicero. I hope I'm saying it properly, where he said, if I had more time, I would write a shorter letter, which was something that, it intrigued me so much, because instead of spending time on just fluffing up the story, I want to spend more time reducing it and simplifying it and developing better and shorter ways to convey the same messages. And children's books demand that. They demand that precision and that simplicity that goes into the writing. So I'm drawn to that for now.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Zainab, for answering all my questions. I'm now going to turn it over to our listeners. And while there are no questions coming in or here yet, there are a couple of comments. So while I read those comments out, listeners, would you please start texting your questions if you have any? So the first comment is from a lady, Minu Khatami. This is very true. I expect she was referring to something you said earlier on. It doesn't say. The next comment is from Rehana. Zainab, you are such a smart and beautiful young lady. We are so lucky to have you as part of our community. Alhamdulillah. Here. All right. Any others?
Oh my goodness, Rehan, she's I see her sometimes as my #1 supporter. She reads everything I write, and she's always communicating with me about her responses to some of the things I write. And I think all I can say is I just hope I fulfill that potential of sharing some of my ideas. And
so you didn't pay her to say that, did you?
No, no, not at all. But
just kidding, just kidding.
Oh, Minu, I think added something.
Can I ask my AV team, Sabira, do you see any other questions I may have missed coming through?
I think there is no question, but a comment from Minu Khatami.
Yeah, I got that one.
Oh, another one, yeah.
Oh, another one. Okay, sorry. Yes, I was agreeing with Zainab's perspective about the impact of social media norms on the definition of hijab. This is going back to the question, and you eloquently talked about how there is some hijab fetishism going on out there, where hijab is being made into a fashion icon, and et cetera, et cetera. I believe that's what she's referring to. From Ali Jawad Karim, mashallah, very inspiring. Wishing you the very best in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think probably, I wonder if we can I like put someone on the spot from the audience? Am I allowed to do that?
Oh, that would be unusual. Well, that depends on who that person is. If it, go ahead. Who are you thinking of here?
Someone who's commented. I think she's probably expecting it. Hopefully, I don't know.
Okay, and you think she's too shy?
I don't know.
You think she's too shy to say anything herself?
Let's see. So should I call her out?
Go ahead.
Okay, let's give this a shot. Let's see what happens. So Minu is actually a really good friend of mine, a very close friend of mine. And I believe she works as a counselor. So maybe, I don't know, Minu, do you want to say anything about the social media? And I'm so sorry, I should have told you that, but I wasn't expecting that I might see potential in calling you up. But Minu, I really would love if you added any comments on the social media aspect.
Go ahead, Minu. Go ahead, Minu. Walaikum salam.
Assalamualaikum. This was a very, very wonderful and much needed conversation, and I'm so glad that you guys have put this together. And yes, I totally agree, and I kind of was really even happy to hear that you're kind of expanding on that conversation and explaining how social media norms are impacting our understanding of the hijab. And I think it's very true when we talk about, I really like how you discuss that core desire in wanting to be validated, but it also being in the denial of, okay, I'm not doing this because of validation, because it's just something that I want to do, right? But essentially that validation adds to your whole perception of, okay, now this is the right track. This is what I want from hijab, right? Whereas now the spirituality aspect of it is now all lost. Like, what are you essentially looking for? What's the purpose behind it? Mm-hmm. And if you're very right in the aspect of kind of bringing up the question of, okay, now, am I defeating the purpose by now exposing like certain pictures of myself on social media while wearing the hijab? Is this the right approach to take? And it's now a huge dilemma as we speak about teenagers, as we speak about young adults, and having these kind of conversations within our communities. I think it's very, very helpful and constructive, and sort of benefiting from individuals like Zainab who have both like the academic studies and sort of like a personal desire to achieve this is very beneficial. Alhamdulillah.
Okay. Thank you, Minu. Thanks for that input. We have had some other comments and actually a couple of questions too. All right, so from Raza, what's the main theme for the children's book you're writing, Zainab?
Oh, the current one, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
It's about resilience, because it's hard work, resilience, being productive, because I think a lot of the struggle these days is about, swallowing hardships and failures and still being able to move on as a result from that. And not just that, but using failure to inform your success. So the book is going to be, I'm giving away a lot of spoilers right now, but it is going to be about, being knocked down and then getting back up, and how it's an important skill for children to develop to set them up for success in the future, and to teach them not to be scared of failure, and in fact, to invite that and to use it.
Right, right. Sounds like a book not just for children, but for adults too.
That's the secret. That's the secret hope that, you know, even adults would find it interesting.
Yeah, we could all use tips on how to get back up again after a blow or whatever. All right, so from Farnaz, mashallah, you inspire many young women in our community. What tips do you have for young girls who want to become authors?
Okay, so tips for becoming an author. I think a big one would have to be to really first understand why you want to be an author. Like, what is the reason behind that? Is it, you know, about getting that popularity or just having a project that someone knows you as something? Or is there really a message that you have? Because that's going to determine what you write. Yeah. So if it's, you know, message driven, then you know that your focus is going to be on content. It's going to be developing those ideas, developing characters that are going to serve your message in your stories. Mm-hmm. But then, you know, if your motivations are, you know, are different, then, you know, maybe your process is going to be more around the marketing part of it. And maybe it's about stories that, you know, first looking at the needs in the market, like what do people need? Is there a gap that I can fill? So I think like analyzing your motivations is a big part of it, because that's going to not only determine what you write, but also how you conduct yourself as an author. And I think the second thing is definitely understanding the power that you have as someone who, you know, wants to write something and then release it to the world. You know, really spending a lot of time with that message, formulating it properly, considering all the perspectives involved, talking to people. So that would be another tip, that, you know, definitely think more about your message and what you want to say. A third tip would definitely be to read a lot. If you have decided this is my message, this is what I want to say, or, you know, if not the message, then this is the type of book I want to write, then pick up a bunch of books that, you know, resonate with you and reflect the style that you're interested in. Go to Indigo, go to the library, just pick up a bunch of books, you know, go through them. And also, yes, the final tip I would say is definitely try to understand what happens after you write the book, because that was part of the one of the most difficult things for me, the marketing. And I think it's when I realized that I'm not a marketer. I don't really care what happens once the book is written. You know, if it, you know, has 1 million reads or 1,000 reads, it doesn't matter so much to me. But I had to learn that the hard way once I realized that I'm not really into the marketing journey. So the last advice I would give is to be aware and to think about, you know, what happens once you've written your book. Are you ready for that?
Okay. One of your tips there was, you know, to read widely and to read a lot. That's not something we're known for, our community, is it?
No, and I think honestly, it's really not people's faults. I think the way that the technology industry is targeting our minds and, you know, our senses, it's something that really we are not equipped to fight at some level. You know, there's so many tricks that go into the way that, you know, stories and not stories, but television shows and series and stuff like that are made appealing to the younger generation, but also the older generation, to a point where it becomes difficult to read and it becomes easy to watch things on, you know, on your laptop or your phone or whatever. So I think it's as much about, you know, building that habit of not gravitating towards the easier things and building the habit of, you know, going towards things that might be difficult now, but will have more rewards in the future. Whereas the other one, it's easy now, but there's no reward in the future. It's just damaging.
So does that mean you think we were, how should I put it? We were more into reading before the advent of technology?
I mean, I would imagine, because you like at that point, you don't really have a choice. Like if you want to stay up to date with you know, current events and stuff, you have to read the news and you have to read those like huge articles in the newspapers. You know, I feel like to an extent, reading was not really, you know, when you were in school, you have to read your textbooks, or you even have to read summaries of them. Now you can just listen while you do other things. So I think we just have a lot of options now for not reading stuff than we did before. Okay.
All right. I just moved to the next comment from Shirin Banu Bamani. Nice to have you on the program, Shirin Bhai. Well done,
She's
Zainab.
Amazing, Shirin Auntie.
Yeah, she is indeed. Well done, Zainab. Very inspiring talk. I have to read the book. And from Hani to everyone, what's your advice to anyone who wishes to publish a book like yourself? I think you've more or less answered that. Do you have anything to add there?
Well, mainly just, deciding in advance whether you want to self-publish or go through a publisher, which each of them, each of them have their own differences and advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah. From Brother Farooq Topan, very insightful talk. Thank you. Are you planning to write about Asiyah's perception of her wider society, the issues she faces in common with other women and also men?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. I don't think I would do that, because I think, everything's subjective, everything's relative. There's observations I could make that are wrong. There's judgments I could make of other people that are wrong, that, I'm missing their side of the story. I'm missing their perspective. And there's things that I wrote when I wrote in 2016, when I wrote Asiyah, that I maybe don't agree with anymore. Maybe I've learned, I know better now. I've heard from other people. My opinions have changed. I think that's dangerous territory to write, about the society. And I think I can only do that insofar as it's affected me and my experience in the society. But I don't think I would ever dare to write, anything that's like directly, the perception of the society, because that's always changing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make, that as time goes on, you do your opinions, your views, your thoughts on life and your mindset changes with time. And that's okay. I mean, that's part of the whole process of growing up and moving on to not just adulthood, but seniorhood. And some people become more entrenched, more conservative. Other people will kind of loosen up a little. But that's how we humans are built. So that's a great point you make.
I really think there should be more seniors writing books, because they have the wealth of experience, and they've witnessed the whole journey in themselves and in their lives of, having certain perspectives, having them changed, having them challenged, having to grow from, a lot of the difficulties, and communicating with people. And so I think, honestly, more than young people, I know this is very strange, but I would love to hear love to read books written by seniors, or even if we had like one book that was a collection of memoirs from, seniors who've had interesting self-development journeys or interesting observations about life. I think that would be pretty amazing.
I agree with you. I mean, I think seniors have a wealth of knowledge and experience to share. I think what's probably preventing them is they haven't been told that by the younger generation. They haven't been told enough that, we really value what you have to say and what you have to share with us. And so they don't feel inclined to write or to share it that way. And I think just a little encouragement and persuasion, as we called it, would help in that respect. But anyway, Shirin Bhai, as the chairperson of our seniors committee, has quickly chimed in here. Okay, I will start writing a book. Thanks, Shirin Bhai. We look forward to it.
Please do. I think she is one of the wisest and most level-headed people I have ever met in my whole life. And she, I often go over to her house with my husband, and we play board games with her, and we spend time with her, and the time always flies by so quickly, because she's just full of like wittiness and wisdom, and just I can forever listen to her talking. So I would definitely read a book written by her.
I firmly agree there. A remarkable lady. Okay, so one comment left just before Shirin Bhai. I must have missed that one. 1 second. From Zainab Tamimi, mashallah, so eloquently spoken, so much depth in the book. Thank you, Zainab, for that comment. And I think that is it, which is about right. We've got 5 minutes left for the end. So if there are no other questions, and I don't think there are, I will start to close the session. Thank you, Zainab, for joining us and for sharing your thoughts and answering my questions. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the nature of your questions, because they really pointed to as Zainab said, the depth of the book. And I really enjoy answering those types of questions rather than, you know, a lot of questions about the process of the self-publishing. So this was really enjoyable. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And we'll have you back again when the next book is published.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that I've said it out loud, I have to make sure I do it.
Oh yeah, you do. We're going to hold you to it.
That sounds great. I need that.
Okay. I normally, the other thing I must do is thank my AV team, Sabra, for helping to run this session. Thank you. Now, I normally end each session with a preview of the next one, but this time it's going to be different because Conversations with Authors is going to take a break for a couple of months while we recharge our batteries and review things. We've been going 10 months or 11 months, I think, straight with an author every month. And we need to now step back and look at the program, decide if we need to tweak it, change it, or come up with something else. So we're going to be doing that for the next couple of months, so you won't hear from us. But we would welcome any comments, any feedback that you have, you, our listeners, as well as any of our authors who are online. If you have any thoughts as to how we could go to take Conversation with Authors to the next level, we would certainly appreciate that. So please do it. You can write to us at info@markresource.org. That's info@markresource.org. Any suggestions for improvement as well. That's it. I wish you all a very good weekend. Khushali Mubarak to all of you. Have a great weekend and have lots of fun and relaxation over the upcoming holidays. Khuda Hafiz.